So how is the real estate market doing? That's the number one question I always get asked. You're probably all aware that rates are high and home prices are reaching an unaffordable level, but in this video I really want to break it down so you know exactly what's going on in the real estate market here in Portland, Oregon. Okay, firstly, a quick introduction for those of you who don't know me. I'm David Backholer. I'm a real estate broker based here in Portland, Oregon. And my goal is to help you find your dream home and certainly educate you about the market so you don't overpay for a house here. So today I want to dig into a few things. I want to talk about the national trends, the local Portland market trends. We'll do a builder update to see what they're saying because that really dictates prices. And then with some recommendations for both buyers and sellers at the end. Now, firstly, let's take a look at the larger scale. The national housing market overview. Typically across the US, the median home price is around $369,000. And there's been a very small increase from last year, just 0.5% year-over-year growth. That's one of the smallest growths we've seen in recent years. The mortgage rates, are around 6.7 to 7%, and that's a 30-year fixed mortgage. This obviously does depend on your credit score, but someone with a good credit, the lowest they can get really these days is around 6.7%. Now, there are ways of reducing that mortgage rate, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but there's ways you can buy down that rate. And then thirdly, inventory is increasing. So we've actually had a 17% increase in inventory versus this time last year. However, we're still below those pre-pandemic levels. So inventory is increasing, which basically means buyers have more choice and a little bit more power. So overall, this starts to dictate the story. The higher the number of houses on the market, the slower that prices tend to raise. So definitely buyers getting a little bit more power than what they did a few years ago, where it was a very strong seller's market. Now, we'll continue with the national trends before we dig into the Portland market. There's many homeowners who are locked into these mortgage rates, below 4%, some are even below 3% loans. So there's definitely a reluctance to sell. There is this pent-up demand from sellers to sell because they need to sell to buy a bigger house or be closer to family. But until those rates come down, people are probably going to stay in their homes and just make it work for a little bit longer. Why give up such a good rate? So new listings are 24% below those pre-2020, those pre-pandemic norms. So overall, people are not listing their houses as much as what they were 7 or 8 years ago. Now, we're also seeing in the middle here that houses are taking longer to sell. Maybe it's 19 days to receive an acceptable offer rather than 11 days from a few years ago. So there's been this change in the last 2 or 3 years. Again, heavily linked to interest rates. Now, 26.6% of listings are also going to have a price reduction. So there's definitely buyers are not rushing out to offer significantly higher than list price. They are being a little bit more patient and waiting for those drops to happen. And at the end, I'll talk about how sellers can maximize their sell price. And then what we see here is price stabilization. So after years of these double-digit gains, or 5 to 7% gains, overall prices have pretty much flattened. No more than 2% growth in many areas. Actually important, we're seeing a little bit more than that, but not by much. But you'll see across the nation, 25 of the top 50 metros are actually seeing a price decline. Now, this all means that the market is transitioning from an extreme seller's market more towards a balanced market. We're not quite balanced yet, still a little bit more in seller's favor, but we're definitely getting a little bit more towards that balanced area, with only 31% of homes selling above list price. And a year ago, this number was 35% of homes selling above list price. So we're still getting more and more towards this balanced area. Now, what's driving this? Well, there's definitely an affordability crisis. I don't think this is breaking news. The NAR, National Association of Realtors Affordability Index, this is around 102. And what that means is it takes the median family income and divides it by the required income to qualify. So people are only just being able to afford their homes. Back in 2019, 2020, this index was 150. So that means they earned 1.5 times the amount they needed to buy the home Now it's really only about a 1-to-1 ratio now. The typical monthly payment, if someone's buying a medium price home with a 20% down payment, they're going to be looking at around $1,900 to $2,000 a month, and that's more than doubled from pre-pandemic levels. So these mortgage rates have really impacted people's ability to buy properties, which is why I don't think property prices are going to increase, certainly by a significant amount, until mortgage rates decline. Basically, these high housing costs have effectively capped what the future price appreciation will be. Industry is forecasting nationwide a slight dip of 1% in national prices by the end of 2025. Again, we'll look at Portland in a little bit. It's a little bit different to this, but overall, nationally, I don't expect to see large increases. Now, what are builders currently doing in this environment? Well, they've got some aggressive incentives. 40% of builders are cutting prices, 5% discount or more. 62% are offering rate buy downs, and that's where they might offer you credit to use their preferred in-house lender, and maybe rather than paying 6.7%, you might pay 5.7% interest. That's definitely more those larger national builders who have a bit more financial clout for doing that. You'll see in the middle here, entry-level focus. What we're doing there is that they're pivoting towards more attainable, more affordable houses. I'm personally seeing a lot more townhouses, low-maintenance townhouses, many without even a rear yard. But this is to capture that first-time buyers, making sure the maintenance fees are kept low, because it's those first-time buyers who eventually feed that resale market. Okay. And then they are also building cautiously. So single family homes, single family starts, that means they're starting to build 10% less homes year over year than what they did this time last year. And obviously this year there's been a lot of talk about tariffs, bringing in more materials is more expensive. So overall, builders have a lot more to be cautious about. Now, if builders are being cautious, that means the supply of homes is going to go down, and that means supply and demand dictates house prices. So we may see a knock-on effect to resale prices overall. Now, builders are expecting to make less profits as well coming up. D.R. Horton, the nation's largest builder, expects about a 21% profit compared to 24% a year ago. So that's gross margins. So there's definitely a housing shortage. Builders are being more cautious. This may mean that house prices could increase further, despite there being that affordability issue we talked about. Now let's talk about the Portland metro area trends. I'm going to hover over some of these numbers. So July 2023, so about 2 years ago, the median home price was $540. 6 months later, $545. This is approximate numbers. Then we're looking at $550 about a year ago, and it's been fairly stable. $550 a year ago, $548 6 months ago, $555 now. So we're seeing some small increases, less than 1% increase. Now at the bottom here, you'll see I'm also looking at average prices, $621,000. That's pretty flat. So overall, the Portland metro market, it's less than 1% growth over the last year or so. What we're seeing is, again, inventory is also on the increase. An increase in inventory obviously means buyers have more choice, a bit more power. Sellers need to do a little bit more work to make sure that their home stands out. So 2 years ago, 2.4 months of inventory. What that means is if no more houses came on the market, then the rate homes are currently selling, 2.4 months is basically how long it would take to sell out of all the available inventory. Okay, so it looks at houses being listed versus houses selling, looks at that ratio. A year ago, we were at 2.8 months, now 3.7 months worth of inventory. Now, a balanced market, and that's what this fourth bar is showing us, means that we'd have around 4 to 6 months of inventory. So we are still in a seller's market, but the trend is trending towards a balanced market here in the Portland metro area. July's 3.7 months of inventory is the highest level we've seen in the summer. Normally you see the inventory levels increase kind of off season where people don't tend to buy homes so much, but this is the highest amount we've seen in several years, but definitely below that balanced market area. Okay, now homes are also taking around 52 days on average to receive an accepted offer. Last year, that number was closer to 44, so houses are sitting on the market longer as well. Now, let's dig into some specific numbers on Portland. So, July 2025, new listings. There's basically a 1% or 0.9% increase in new listings year over year. So, slightly more houses are being listed, but pending sales and closed sales are in decrease, right? They're in that decline. So, for July, more houses listed, houses closing it down, that gap has got a little bit bigger, and that's driving that increase in the available inventory. But the story is quite promising, or slightly different when we look at year to date, so January through July of this year, about a 4.6% increase in available listings compared to last year. So more homes are being sold. And I touched on this earlier. Many sellers feel locked into their homes because they have those low rates. You're starting to see these things start to give. Boy, people are accepting these are the rates, and they have to give up those rates if they want to move, be closer to family, relocate somewhere else, or buy a bigger home. Whereas pending sales and closed sales are pretty flat, are very, very stable. So that again is the reason for that increase in inventory. So Portland's market, we're in that holding pattern. Sales this year versus last year is basically flat, a 0.3% increase year over year, so it's pretty much flat. But the market is a little bit cooler and then actually healthier because there's more options available on the market. Now, let's talk about Portland's affordability and some buyer profile. And this first number really shocked me when I read this, and I think it actually makes sense based on some of the conversations I've been having with some clients of mine. The affordability index. Portland's families earning the median income, which is $124,000, can only afford 87% of the monthly payment of a median price home. Okay, so let's just take a moment to digest that. If you're earning the median amount in Portland, you can only afford 87% of the median priced home in Portland, right? So your income generally gets you below the median priced home in the area. Now there's ways to try to get you into a median priced home if you have a median income. Again, a lot of rate buy downs, making that interest rates more affordable. Now, price distribution, and this kind of really ties up. 30% of sales in July were under $500,000, 50% between that $500,000 and $800,000, and then less than 10% over $1 million. Now, about 7% are under that $300,000, which shows that scarcity in those truly affordable options. And to look at the buyer profile here, first-time buyers, those are the people who are having the hardest time. Now, it's tough for first-time buyers because to get onto the market, you need to buy something and then that house grows the equity. But we've already seen that we're not really expecting home prices to significantly increase over the next few years. So even buying a home today will probably not grow you much equity over the next few years. Now, I will say, I do believe once rates decline, equity and home prices will shoot up. So you need to buy something which you can, not necessarily your forever home, but you're going to want to stay in that home for a few years at least. Relocation buyers, this is an area that I personally work with a lot of relocation buyers from out of state. They tend to be a little bit higher price point, have a little bit more disposable income, and therefore they're driving this higher price point overall. Now, until things change, I don't expect any of this to change. So until rates decline, I think we'll still continue to have that affordability issues. So as I put down on the slide here, I do not believe we will see any large increases until rates decline. And when's that going to be? Well, there has been conversation about that this year. Personally, if it happens this year, I think those drops are going to be very, very small. I think realistically next year, 2026, is before we start to see any significant changes. But rates have been this way for several years now. I don't foresee that being a significant change over the next year. Okay, so let's talk about the submarket performance in Portland. Places like Lake Oswego, West Lynn, these are premium areas. These are the most expensive areas in the Portland metro area. And they saw a minor dip in activity. Year-to-date sales are down about 3.6%. The average price still over $1 million. Lake Oswego, anybody who's familiar with Lake Oswego will know $1 million doesn't get you so far as what it does in Portland or any of the areas outside Portland. And then you got your mid-tier markets, Beaverton, lower. Prices there are pretty flat, actually about a 1% growth year over year. But there is a drop in the number of sales by 7.7% year to date. So that's actually quite a big drop. And more affordable areas, Hillsborough, Forest Grove, Gresham. Gresham has a lot of new construction. It's actually really nice now. I recommend people who are looking for an affordable new construction really do consider Gresham, especially that Pleasant Valley area. You're seeing slight sales increases as buyers are looking for more affordable options. And then the condo market over the years since COVID has really struggled. Downtown condo sales are recovering, certainly nowhere near as strong as single-family suburban homes. We saw a lot of people move out from downtown into the more residential single-family suburban home area because they want a bit more space. Working from home is a little bit more common. So there's lots of areas outside Portland where you can buy a home for the same price as a condo in downtown if you don't need to go into the office every day. Then that condo market will still struggle overall. Now, let's talk about rates. I keep saying time and time again now that rates are really driving a lot of this conversation. So rates are expected to remain between 6.5% and 7% for the rest of the year. I already said right now rates are around at 6.7 to 7%, so you can see we don't expect to see anything drop. The Fed's pretty cautious. If they do make a drop, it's not going to be a dramatic drop. Okay, so this is where things are. And then what's going to happen next year? We could see rates drop below 6.5%, but keep in mind, if rates drop, that makes buyers have more spending power, makes homes more affordable, but then a lot more buyers come out and shop, so that can in turn increase property prices. So I always try to tell buyers, don't try to time things perfectly. If you can afford a house now and you find something you like, go for it, because you can always refinance later down the line. But if you wait for rates to drop, you'll be fighting against more competitive, more buyers, and therefore your affordability may not even be more affordable once rates drop because there'll be more competition out there. So what's going to happen? Home prices, and we're looking at nationwide and Portland here. So nationwide, we don't expect a crash. It all comes down to supply and demand. We know overall that supply is a lot less than demand. I touched on builders. Builders are being more cautious. They're not going to flood the market. If prices drop, it could be more than 1% nationwide, but it could go up by about 2% nationwide. So really, somewhere between 1% decline and 2% growth is what we're seeing nationwide. Metros vary. Some metros, especially down in the Texas area, are struggling because they've built so much new construction, and that's keeping those rates low. The Florida market is really hit and miss right now. A lot of times it's hard to get insurance on some of those homes in Florida. So nationwide, lots of issues by market. Portland obviously is the hidden market, and an Oregon market I know a lot better. Local prices, I don't foresee a price drop. Typically we see rates going up, we see home prices go up around 3% every year. But if you're looking at a cautious expectation here, a cautious forecast, somewhere around 0 to a 2% growth is probably the most probable scenario. But if rates do decline, then you can expect that to go up a little bit more than that. And then what's going to happen to housing inventory? So nationwide, slow improvement in inventory. We're seeing that slow, steady increase in inventory. I touched on homeowners feeling rate locked, limiting that resale value. New construction is at critical source for people who want to step up, from a smaller home into a larger property, or even first-time buyers. But if builders are being more cautious, then inventory might not take a dramatic increase. Portland inventory, we think it will increase right now, 3.5 months. We think it could become more and more balanced. Sales volume, it's steady. Builders are definitely being cautious and incentivizing people to come and buy their properties. I see a lot of rate reductions. I see great interest rate temporary buy downs that builders are offering. And I've done a whole video series recently on all types of new construction. So if you want to learn more about that, reach out to me, send me a message, and I'll point you in that direction. But I've done a lot of work with builders recently, because I've got some clients coming from YouTube actually who want to know a lot more about new construction. Okay, and then to summarize, and we'll talk a little bit more in a moment about recommendations for buyers and sellers. So to summarize, slow and steady is basically where the market's at. Expect small incremental movements in rates, in prices, in inventory. We're not going to see crashes, right? This is not 2008. The market will continue to normalize after years and years of that volatility. So this is the market. I don't foresee it changing significantly in the future. And buyers and sellers really need to be more strategic and flexible to succeed in this market. Now, what should buyers do in this current market? Well, critically, the first thing to do is to get pre-approved. And I can put you in contact with a lender that I've recently been referring all my clients to, because they've taken great care of my clients. But it's good to understand not what you can afford, but what you want to spend. Those numbers are very different. And they'll basically, a lender will tell you what your monthly payments will be in this market, and you can see what you're comfortable spending. Affordability and comfortable, what you want to spend are two very different things. So getting pre-approved is always the number one thing to do. All right, understand what you can spend in your buying power. Leverage the inventory, so buy that. And I'll talk about a story I have in just a moment. But Portland's inventory is at 3.7 months. Houses are sitting for longer. You've got more power than what you had a few years ago. So don't hesitate to ask for things like closing costs, rate buy downs or repairs. Consider new construction. New construction homes, believe it or not, can be more affordable than resale homes, because these builders have more financial clout. They can offer you better rates. They can offer you upgrades to homes. They want to sell these homes, and definitely there's options there. D.R. Horton's one that comes to mind that I got some clients working with in the process of buying a home. They'll close in October. There's a home development in Gresham for under $400,000 for a brand new townhome, a very attractive townhome with some nice views. You also need to think long term. Focus on a house that fits you, not necessarily your forever home, because that's never really the right way of buying real estate, but certainly that fits you for the next 3 to 5 years. All right, look at that time frame, rather than trying to time the market, because prices are stable. You can refinance it later down the line. If you're waiting for price reductions, you may be in for a shock once rates come down, because things may not end up right. And then stay flexible. Inventory is scarce, even though it's increasing. Typically those homes that are moving ready, those ones still sell pretty fast. So just be flexible. Look outside your area. Consider townhomes, condos, things that might still appreciate over the next few years, but try to maximize your budget. Okay. Now with sellers, you've got to price it realistically. We're not in the market we were in 2 or 3 years ago. Buyers aren't getting that under 3% mortgage rates where they can afford a lot more. Buyers are finding it tougher to buy, and therefore they're being more patient. So you need to price it realistically from day one. And something I always do is a comparable analysis on your property. We do it detailed analytics. You're going to make your home stand out. Buyers have more choice. So if you're just going to do, make your home need some work, buyers will probably look over it. So make it feel fresh. Professional staging is a great return on investment. You have to be more open to negotiate. Don't take offense if someone doesn't offer you the price you want. You know, you have to be a little bit more open to that. As I mentioned, 26% of homes nationwide are seeing price reductions. Buyers are going to ask for concessions. They may ask for rate buy downs, closing costs, you know, so you do have to be a little bit more open to this now, unfortunately. You have to understand your timeline. Well-maintained price homes are still selling, right? We're still seeing some houses are still receiving multiple offers on the first weekend. I don't want this to feel doom and gloom for sellers, but only for those homes that are great in the right area, presented well, are priced well, just really presented well, have a lot of appeal. And then, work with someone who understands the market, all right? Understand the market, data-driven really is the way to go. Obviously, I like to put my hand in the air and say, I'm a data-driven agent. I had 20 years in customer analytics working in a consulting environment, so this is my bread and butter. Okay, so I wanted to talk briefly about a recent client I've been working with who actually found me via my YouTube channel, as I think their situation really gives a great example on how to navigate the market and things to keep in mind for both buyers and sellers. Now, they were only in town for a week. They were relocating from out of state, and their goal was to buy a home here in the Portland metro area. I set up about 15 appointments for us to see. All of these homes are 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, around 1,500 square feet, all single-story homes in their target location. Now, on paper, all 15 of these homes match my client's requirements. However, once we walk through them, there's actually maybe 2 or maybe 3 homes in total that stood out to them. And it was these homes that were in much better condition. The previous homeowners kept it in really great shape. They were presented really well, and any issues were fixed prior to coming on the market. Now, this is a key learn I want to make for both buyers and sellers. Firstly, for buyers, you have a lot more choice now, especially compared to what you did 2 or 3 years ago. Back then, all of these homes would probably have had accepted offers within the first week. And definitely you would have been in a very competitive bidding war. Now you have the ability to pick and choose a little, because there's so many more options available. Now for sellers, it's no longer as simple as putting your house on the market and expecting to receive multiple offers in that first week. You do need to make that extra effort to make sure your home stands out against the competition, because that pool of buyers, as I just said, is much lower. Now, if you are thinking of either selling your home here or relocating to the Portland metro area, you do need to reach out to me. You can give me a call, send me a text, send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. But for now though, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again in that next video.